Can you talk a little bit about why people advocate for reparations?
Mhm. Yeah, well, first, I think it's worth noting that the economic, political condition of a lot of Caribbean countries is directly an outgrowth of histories of, centuries of colonial exploitation and enslavement. So, people will sometimes, as you noted earlier, dismiss these events as part of a bygone era, but not notice that, in the same way that like wealth can compound over generations, inequality and poverty can compound over generations. So it can leave some countries in a position where it's very difficult to um, sort of gain any momentum or sort of like, achieve any kind of discernible growth because of all the indebtedness that they're grappling with. And even, in the most explicit cases, like say Haiti, where essentially, after the Haitian Revolution, the sort of sovereign nation of Haiti was in many ways extorted, right? Like punished, forced to pay massive debts to France for land and property destroyed during the revolution. And I think this goes back to the question of legitimacy, because if enslavement is just sort of one way of gaining wealth and a way that's equivalent to other ways, there's not much of an argument. But if enslavement is a crime against humanity, or kind of, if transatlantic slave trade was riddled with kind of war crimes, then the people who suffered were victims and are deserving of recompense. Like there are many atrocities where at the time, people didn't really bat an eyelash, but later people say this was unjust, this was violent, this was coercive, and the victims are deserving of restitution and redress. So if in fact we believe that slavery was violent and, and it was a kind of atrocity, then the victims of atrocity are deserving of redress. And I think where it can be thorny is people will say like, oh, the people who perpetrated these sort of atrocities are no longer around, or how do we decide who gets the money? But to me, those are not really valid reasons not to pursue it, because, or people will say things like, oh, well, there's no way to put a monetary value on slavery. And of course, I understand that perspective, but we can say that with any atrocity, I sometimes will say to myself, like, in the same way that people of African descent are using like 23andMe and these new forms of sort of genealogical research to decide, just to cover their ancestry. I wish there was like a financial version of 23andMe where corporations or families can trace their history back and find out how much they've benefited from the history of the slave trade, like through financial records and things like that. And to the extent that we can actually identify which companies have profited tremendously from the slave trade, and often we can, at least, those companies could, be responsible for helping to redress these sort of crimes against humanity and things like that. But overall, I think that we can be much more imaginative and much more rigorous in our analysis and in our accounting of this.
I think there's something very, very conceptually powerful about a reparations framework, right? Where a lot of racism is rooted in this sort of notion of personal responsibility, that the condition or the position of Black people in American society is ultimately the responsibility of Black people. However, that sort of gets embroidered, right? But a reparations framework flips it around, right? It is the theft, and it is the theft of the U.S. government, of corporations, the transfer of wealth, historic crimes that then create the responsibility of the state and the society to repay that crime. That I think it's a better framework. I mean, obviously a better framework to start from for thinking about politics and society and actually dealing with the crimes that were created by slavery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think that like too often the discourse about slavery is shrouded in kind of shame, either, an attempt to shame people who are actively participating in it, or people sort of apologizing, feeling guilty for their involvement. But I think I'm much more interested in what it means to think about the legacy and reckon with it in practical terms. Like it's not about the shame. Like if someone feels bad about what the ancestors did, why not redress what the ancestors did? If someone has concerns about the legacy of slavery, why not sort of activate that to translate that into sharing resources or something like that. You know? So I think for a number of reasons, too often the conversation stays at the level of shame when in fact it could go someplace that's much more beneficial to all.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place to sign off. Dr. Ralph, thank you so much for coming here and sharing your knowledge with our students. We really appreciate it.